Hi there. Thank you for watching this video. In this video, I will explain you step by step, one example, how you can create an order to cash process for process mining in Power Automate. I will start with some theoretical words using a PowerPoint slide. Then after that, I will give you a demonstration how to perform the task step by step. Let's continue. If we talk about order to cash for process mining part, then initially you would like to see at what moment an order is created. Then the next step could be an order confirmation. After the order confirmation, we have a package slip, then the invoice, and if we are lucky, also the customer will pay us for the invoice amount. Now there can be some variations where, for example, there are multiple packing slips or multiple invoices for one single sales order. That will be also covered in this scenario. In certain cases, you would also like to know a bit more. Maybe you would like to include if there were collection letters sent, yes or no. That could be a variation on the process, but also do you want to include return orders or not? When you look at Dynamics 365 Finance Operations, the data model, or Business Central, then the transaction tables are not directly usable as an event log in the system. The details are stored in various multiple tables for just a single sales order process. All details for a sales order are processed via different pages in the system, and also the details are stored in multiple various tables. To be able to get then event logs, you need to check, do I want to get the event logs out of my transactional data, or maybe I would like to have it event driven as part of certain actions in the application, send out a business event and log that in a separate table. When gathering some data for events, you also need to check what level of details do you want to have in your process. Do you want to have it on order level or maybe also order line and item level? You might also think of what additional attributes can I bring to my process mining cases. For example, is there a difference in a currency or maybe an item group or a customer group? Or there can be a difference between a direct delivery or not. That could be additional attributes which you would need to consider as part of a design or not. And when taking data for the event logs, do you want to have only complete or pending processes? So when is an order to cash process complete? Do you would like to know also just the part until the invoice, yes or no, or only the paid invoices? When I worked out this example, I had some prerequisite in mind, which I will just explain a bit later. But first, before getting data in an event log, maybe first highlight what are the requirements for an event log for process mining. At least we need to have a case ID. A case ID, in this case, it could be the sales order ID. And activity, is the sales order created? Is a confirmation sent? Is the packing slip posted? Is an invoice posted? And did we receive a payment, yes or no? That could be the activities for this example. And we need a timestamp. In this scenario, the tables in Finance Operations do support a created date time, which I will use in my demo. For the attributes, I only had chosen to add the legal entity to check if there are variations between one or the other legal entity in how they are just performing or following a certain process. To be able to check what connectors are available, there are a lot of them where you can choose, for example, an CSV file or maybe an ODBC connection, an web API, an SQL database, and more. But if you look at the connectors, there is no connector for finance operations, and there's also no direct connector for Business Central. We can get around that quite easily. In this case, we need to gather some data in a separate event log, and for that would be in a different storage or from a different connector type. And in that case, that connector type I had chosen for this demo is supported. I will show you that later. Now, if you look at just the data model, if we take the data from finance operations, then for the order creation, we have a sales order table with particular information. There's a separate table for the order confirmations. For the fulfillment, there is a packing slip table. For the invoices, we also have a separate table. Until that part, all the tables do have a reference to the sales order ID. If you look at the payment part, then the only thing we know is that there's a customer transaction created when posting an invoice. There's also a customer transaction posted when we post a payment. And using the settlement details, the customer settlement table, we can link the payment with the invoice transaction. And in that case, we also know what is the sales order ID for the payment. This is just a simplified overview of the data model. There might be more complexity in it as well. Now, what I wanted to do for this example, I did not want to have any customization. So there was no option to create business events or any other events in the system to be able to act on it and store somewhere an event. And I did not want to have any manual ETL or intervention of getting the data. For example, when just retrieving information from various tables, you can just copy paste and put it all under each other and then have an event log file created. That's not what I wanted to do manually. So what did I do? As solution direction, I've chosen to use the new Fabric link option. There might be also an option to use, for example, the Synapse link and copy the data from finance and operations into Fabric or the Synapse. And then the Fabric link, but also Synapse, they do support an SQL endpoint where you can create an SQL view using a union query. And a union query will sum up data from various tables if you can find the same format. For this solution direction, you also need to be aware of potential costs. In case you enable tables via the Fabric link or the Synapse link, in that case, data will be stored in an OneLake or in your own data lake on your Azure subscription. But using the Fabric link, it will just consume additional Dataverse storage, and you would need a Fabric capacity or Power BI license to be able to continue and create the query and make the data available. The data I wanted to have is selected from the sales order table. In fact, we have two different activities here. A sales order is created with also a created date time, the created on as timestamp, or a modified on with a particular status in case the sales order is cancelled. Then we can also add the confirmation data, the packing slips, the sales invoices, and a more complex part to link the payment transaction with the invoice customer transaction, and then also add that part in one single SQL query. As a result, you can have 4 different columns: a case ID, the timestamp, an activity, and in this case, one attribute, a company. And that's also what I will show you in the demo. But before that, if you want to add more complexity to this query, maybe you would like to have an analysis per item on the order lines, or you can think of additional attributes like were there multiple deliveries or invoices, or was there a summary packing slip or invoice? Do you want to know who was the salesperson? Was the credit note? Is the direct delivery? Was it an intercompany order? If you want to add that type of details, then the SQL view needs to be extended, and it will be way more complex than just the example I shared here. The SQL query itself, you can find that one on my supporter blog from this video. Now let's get to the details. Now I'll switch my screen. In finance operations, we have the sales orders, and from the sales order, there's an option to, for example, post a packing slip or an invoice, and all the data is stored in various tables. Then in the Power Apps Maker portal, you can look at the tables. From the tables, you can check or create if there's a Fabric or Synapse link. In this case, all data will be then visible in Synapse link view, but this one is now stored in the Microsoft OneLake. In this case, in the Fabric link, it will enable all Dataverse tables, and for finance operations, you need to add particular tables yourself. So we can filter, for example, on finance operations, the tables I selected in my demo. Two tables here, the data area and purchase table, are not used for this query. The other tables do. And if you want to manage which tables will be selected for the Synapse or the Fabric link, you can click on Manage Tables. It will load for a while, so I already prepared the view with the tables. Initially, you will see the Dataverse, but also Dynamics 365 for Finance and Operations tables, and you can select which tables you need for a particular query. Then click Save and wait on the initialization, and after initialization, it will just also continuously sync. Now, if you want to view the data, that can be done in a workspace via Power BI. Initially, when you open it, it might open in a lakehouse, but as I mentioned before in my presentation, there's also a SQL Analytics endpoint where you can create SQL queries. I already did this before, so I can now paste the SQL query as I also shared in the PowerPoint, and you can find this one on my blog. If you run this one, you will get information about all sales orders, and all records will be unified in one single view. Now, then it would be possible to save this as a view. That's also what I did do. So there's now an order to cash view available in my analytics endpoint, which will have exactly the same data with case ID, timestamp, activity, and the company. Now, this information can be directly consumed in Power Automate Process Mining. And for that, you only need to know the database name and the server name. You can find that information if you go to the settings. So what you have here is a SQL connection string. But this connection string can be used to connect to the SQL Analytics endpoint, and it has a particular database name. Now, if you then go to the next step in Power Automate, if you go to Process Mining, you can create a new process. We can provide this with a name. For example, order to cash. Click on continue, where we can connect the data. First, we'll skip the option to provide a Power BI workspace. As mentioned, we can use a SQL Server database connection. We can provide the server name that can be copied from the Power BI settings. Then we also need to have the database name. And you need a connection. If the connection was not provided, you would need to enter your credentials and log in once. Then you can see what tables are available or views are available from the SQL Server database for this analytics point, and we can select the order to cache table. This is the view I created and saved. Click on Next. This will open a Power Query form. In this step, you have the option just to use a Power Query to make additional selections. For example, if you want to look only for the USMF company, you can set a filter, but you can also create columns or modify data a bit. Then we can click on Next. In the last part, we need to link the columns of this view with the attribute types for process mining. So the case ID field will be linked with attribute type case ID, timestamp with an event start. We have an activity, and we can use the company as a case level attribute. When we check that we have the mandatory attributes selected, we can click on Save and Analyze. It will load the data, it will transform it, how it can be presented as a report on process mining, but actually I did this before, and I can show you the result already. If we look at the first part, if you use the standard demo data from finance and operations, you will get not an order to cache, but an order to mesh process. And this is just because the demo data is set up in an incorrect order. Sales orders were created, packing slips were posted, invoices were posted, and a long time after that, the sales confirmations were added to the demo database. And what you can see is that there are a lot of variations incorrectly. If you use this approach with the query I provided in a customer environment where everything will be created in logical order, then you will have a better overview. So what I did do is for the USMF company, I cleaned up the data, and then you get a nice overview of a normal order to cash process where it will just start logically always with a sales order is created. And then an interesting part is that there's a large number of activities directly going to a sales packing slip posted, and the sales order confirmation is skipped for a lot of them. That means that they probably are not using the correct process for the order confirmations. So this might be a finding number one already. If they are using the system conform the desired process. Now, what we also can see is that after an invoice is posted, it is sometimes an end process that can be seen with the red arrow. And in certain cases, also the payment was processed, and that will be then the end of the process. Also, what you can see is that the sales order is created, and after it has been created several times, the sales order was cancelled. From this view, what is not logical, but that's still some data I need to find and clean up, is that after a payment, there was a sales order, a sales invoice posted. It could be logical. Maybe for the same sales order, there were multiple invoices. So after the company received a payment for one of the invoices, a new invoice could be created, which is then again already paid or still pending to be paid. That could be an explanation here, but I need to find out if that is really the case or not. You can also look at the performance for processing times. You can look at the total duration or the mean duration, and what you can see then is that usually after the invoice, then we have the largest moment where we need to wait for our money. Then we can see what is the maximum, what's the minimum, and maybe just if we want to speed up the number of days that we get the money paid by the customer, we can focus on some credit management options like sending collection letters or call the customers. This concludes my demo for this option. I hope you liked this demonstration, and I would encourage you all to also try out the same process and query. Just look at my blog, download the details, and get started. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to comment below this video or on my blog, and I will try to help you as well. Well, thank you for watching this video, and till next time. Bye bye.